but I just wanted to say thank everybody, my colleagues and everybody who's joining the sessions. It's been quite a fast-paced programme. We've had a lot of commitment to it, and today is really about not just people have attended events, there've been some amazing conversations and some sharing, but also what happens next, because what I really hate after a really exciting, energizing conference is, and then what? Oh, we'll all see you next year this time. Well, no, this isn't the case today. So that's what we're going to take you through today, how we bring all of this together and start delivering on the ambition that we had at the beginning, that this would set councils up to either strengthen or start creating the teams that they need to take forward retrofit, and within a kind of whole place low carbon agenda, essentially, which is where we're getting to. So that's the purpose of today. We're going to be starting with just a quick summary of where we've been. Then Tom from the LGA will take us through as the client about what the objectives of the LGA were and how they've been spending your council money on this programme. Charlie has been working as an individual in small collectives and now for Greater Manchester Combined Authority on developing over, say, the last 15 years, the policy context for how we actually scale up retrofit and what that starts to look like in practice. Then we've got Rachel from Stroud District Council, so a smaller authority. I hope she's still going to be able to join us this morning, talking about what they're doing there. So the other end of the scale, because we have had some requests to actually not just feature the huge, big, all singing, all dancing initiatives that are going on, but also what's happening where there's less resource, but equal commitment, passion, and actually activity over a number of years. And then Hampshire County Council are going to talk about one of the big thorny issues that we've had all the way through this is how do we build the supply chain capacity? What do we do about skills and training, and how they've approached it from a slightly unusual starting point, I would say. So again, understanding in terms of your authority, who might be doing something that you may not really realise could help to really contribute to this retrofit, scaling up retrofit agenda. We've got a little time for Q&A, and then John will take us through actually how we bring all of this together to move forward into action planning, picking up on how Tom's introduced it at the beginning, and then we'll finish before 11:30 on what this means for you in the next couple of months and how you actually capitalise on the investment that you've made. So if I could just hand over to Richard to take us through on a quick recap about where we've been so far. Thanks, Richard.
Good morning, everyone. I've really enjoyed going through all these sessions so far. There's been some really interesting and illuminating observations and feedback. I'm just waiting for my presentation to come up. So I actually went through all of my notes of the technical briefings and the coaching sessions just to really pull through some of the key issues. If that's a little bit small, we will share that with you after this call. But really just to start to hear some of the key issues, the big sticking points or the big issues that you felt you've been able to develop as a driver for moving forward, and just put them in the three main themes that we had within the technical briefings. And you can see there that there's quite a broad range of issues and points, some of them really outside of the local authority control and some absolutely core issues. So if you start to understand which are the core issues that local authority does control, then some of them you'll be very clear about, things like planning guidance, procurement issues, about understanding and scoping local training needs, about member engagement and resident engagement. And I also put on there a few that are sort of on the edges where they really need a little bit of local authority and partner working as well. When you start to look at that, the link into fuel poverty programs, trust comes through repeatedly, but also some of the issues about linking to other economic benefits, linking to other broader health and social issues as well. So if we now start to take out what's outside of the direct control of the local authorities, I think this tells us two things. First, it tells us a really very key role that local authorities have in leading and developing retrofit locally. It also shows some of the really key issues that are really quite difficult to work with and are not in the direct control of local authorities. So they require partnerships, which is why this program's been set about, but they require a real careful understanding of how they'll be developed and how you will aim to see what success is. I think this tells us, when you're looking at action plans, what are some of the key issues that you really need to start understanding. They are part of the key success factors of retrofit, but they are issues that might be outside of your immediate control. And then just to come back to some sort of understanding the detail of these, I tried to split these into what are the hard and soft issues that have been the theme of the coaching sessions. Now, I found it's a little bit subjective, so you might not agree exactly with my split of this. And I also wondered whether there'd be some sort of pattern that emerges. And actually, I don't think there really is a pattern. I think hard and soft issues emerge in all three areas. I mean, you might sort of expect that in training and skills providers, which is a relatively maybe more straightforward process, it's more full of hard issues that really are about understanding the relationships that can be formed. But when you start looking at communities, there's a whole load of soft issues that really require local authorities to work with many different community organisations and community partners to really start to create that trust and those drivers for retrofit. So that was all I was wanting to do as an introduction. I just think it shows the real breadth of information that everybody has brought out during the technical briefings and during the coaching sessions, which have been really enjoyable in terms of hearing approaches and ideas develop. But it also shows the complexity, and I think that's what we keep going on about, is retrofit is complex and it requires many, many partners to enable it to work. I'll hand back to Rosemary.
Thanks very much, Richard. And I think everybody's aware of the complexity and therefore the rationale for this programme, which was to try and find space for those conversations with your colleagues to build up the internal collaboration in order to build the external and strengthen the external partnerships. So I think just on that note, if I could ask Tom from the LGA just to take us back to the beginning of the design of this programme and what the objectives are. And we'll pick back up on that at the end of the session this morning. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Rosemary. Let me share my screen. Is that in slideshow mode?
Yep.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, cool. Well, thank you for giving me the time up front. I know I've only got a minimal amount of time to sort of get through and sort of illustrate, like Rosemary said, what we're all here to do, I guess, for this whole learning journey that we've all been on. So I'm going to do a bit of signposting up front on what the LGA has done recently, where we've come from, and you'll have all access to these slides. So there's a lot of links that people can follow through and whatnot. So I'm Tom Denman, Climate Change Advisor at the LGA, and as Rosemary said, I'm sort of looking after this project on behalf of the LGA. So without further ado, I will jump into these slides. So yeah, the climate change program's in its third year now. So a lot of you may have already had quite a bit of interaction with the program over the 3 years. We're really pushing ahead across the sector in terms of how many councils we're engaging with. I think the slide says 95%, but I think in recent weeks we've pumped it up a bit now to something more like 97. So we're really making good headway in getting the awareness of all the good practice that you're all doing in the sector and doing projects like this and training councils and signposting to good resources. So if you haven't properly had a little deep dive into our website, please go have a look because there's a lot of really good stuff that's been built up over the past 3 years. Just to signpost as well, one of our other projects that we're doing at the moment, which I'll jump on to in an hour or so, but is a decarbonising transport action learning series that we're doing with Mott MacDonald. We're working with 31 councils in that space to sort of develop their knowledge and understanding around the decarbonising transport strategy and agenda for the sector. We've published loads of blogs relating to all the sessions that we've held, and we've got a webinar in January that I just wanted to promote here as well, shamelessly, just do a bit of a plug. So if that's in your portfolio or you're interested in that space, please come along because you'll find something of use in there. You may have also come across our NZIP Net Zero Innovation Program as well, which is all around building bridges between universities and councils to leverage the expertise in the education sector to drive on innovation around different net zero projects. So again, please go have a look online and look at the case studies, because there's a lot of good learning that can be salvaged out of the website. The last big plug was our recent Class the Planet campaign over COP27. We've got about 180 case studies online, and we're always looking for new ones, but I'll get on to more of the output stuff in a minute, but if there is anything else that jumps out beyond just the retrofitting space, then please go online, have a look at our interactive map. Really useful for picking up what your neighbours are doing, what the region's doing. If you have anything that you want to submit that's beyond the retrofitting, then please use that form on our website. We're always looking for new best practices, and you can follow through onto the website through the forms and the links on this slide. So where have we come from? We ran an action learning step series in the previous financial year. We've got blogs and all sorts of different sort of accessible content online. And just to flag as well, I'm sure colleagues from like Rosemary and everyone will promote this, but we've got a webinar coming up in a couple of weeks on the 6th of December where Beth Collins from FWM is going to be presenting on this programme, along with a few council case studies as well that you might find of use as well. So if you haven't signed up already, there's a link at the bottom on that purple banner for you to sign up as well. And obviously, the reason why we're all here today is the action plan training series that you've all been partaking on. Again, you've been getting regular communications on this, but all the webinars, all the technical briefings are available on the LGA website. So again, on that purple banner, go have a look. But you guys have been very much central to this, so I'm not going to dwell on this point too long. The main bulk of what I want to talk about today then is just to remind you, as we're coming to the end of the general training series, is what you agreed to at the start of your when you originally submitted your application into the course. And as you will remember, on the application form, there was this sort of bullet point around you agreeing to share the learning of what you've experienced on the course with the councils on our website, either via case study, blog, webinar, podcast, or something else. And I'll delve into a few more examples of what you can start to work on as the main bulk of the sessions and the coaching sessions come to an end for the next month or next couple of weeks. But and again, like I said, the slides will be available, so you can refer back to this. But the purpose of what we want you to get out of the output and the case studies and everything is to share the learning that you've got, the journey that you've been on, help you create action around the retrofitting agenda, provide clarity locally or to yourself or to your colleagues or to your members, residents, whoever it might be, around what you're intending to do. And essentially, at the end of the day, we want you to deliver productive impact in this space. So if the outputs allow you to frame your mind and your activity and your forward planning into that, and then I think that's a big success from the LGA's perspective. But that's just a reminder of what we're expecting. So I was actually in Birmingham at the weekend on a councillor training section, and it was talking about sort of how councillors do strategic planning going forward and how they sort of come to terms with how they build action lists and action plans to sort of produce outcomes and sort of direct their activity and their strategic direction in the right way. So I've included this slide, which I thought was actually really timely, given that we were talking about this today. But something, I guess, a 6-point list for you to consider when you sit down to look at your outputs, do a bit of reflection on how you go from point A to point B on the action planning sort of journey that you want to go on. So a really helpful, simple step if you're struggling of where to start. But I'll let you look at these in your own time, but it's there in the slide if you want to have a little back at them. So what do the output actually can they consist of? So Rosemary and the team will be helpfully sending out an overview guidance briefing note to you that will detail these in a bit more detail about what you can produce. We're looking for as much innovation, much engagement as possible with what you want to do. So thinking outside the box, you don't have to stick to these, but there's a good sort of start to 10 here for you to work on. So it could be something like a video, podcast, a case study report, a business case that you might be wanting to sort of put forward, a collaboration agreement or sort of a stakeholder network or regional peer network that you want to create, and writing sort of a blog or a report around that. You could also look at doing a bit of a stakeholder engagement plan or a map, or lastly, if you wanted to really sort of get to grips with developing a full action plan, then I'm not going to stop you guys from pushing on in that space either. But these are, like I said, we want these outputs to lay the foundation for you to build that fertile soil for you to, like I said, provide clarity, create action, and produce those productive impact. So like I said, we'll be circulating that note around where we'll have a bit more detail on here for you to look again, pick apart, get to grips with it all, and have a bit of a think about what you want to produce. Just some points that I wanted to just that John, Richard, Rosemary, Beck, and I were talking about in some of our catch-ups as well, about reflecting on the coaching sessions and what you've been feeding back to us and what they've been saying to you. So one of the necessary things that we want you to consider as well when you're producing these things is digital accessibility. On these slides as well, there are links to articles that help you sort of pick apart a bit more, but we want you to make sure that everything you're producing is accessible through our website. If you've got, for those like sort of individuals that are using screen readers or that like sort of need alternative text or transcripts or anything like that, if you're doing videos. So there's a full top to bottom guide on our website around the accessibility requirements. We've also got example case studies on our website as well. So if you wanted to find some inspiration, please go and have a look at that. But like I said, if you're like I said with the 6-point sort of steps, the top two are a bit more of like when you're sitting down. If you need that inspiration, I guess we were talking about sort of looking at those epiphany moments. So when you've been going through the technical briefings or the coaching sessions and you've had that eureka moment of like something clicking into place, then definitely have a think about like when that might have happened over the things and focus in on building your case study or your output around that. And then there's this other bit that John was sort of talking about, that the themes that have been coming out of the coaching sessions are around trust, clarity, decision making. If you want to theme some of your outputs around that, then please do, because they seem to be the most salient things that have been coming out of the sessions. I know I'm pushed for time here, so I'm just going to outline some of the key dates that we want to do just to make sure that you guys feel as comfortable as possible when you're producing this. So the LGA and SWM are going to be hosting some output Q&A drop-in sessions in the new year. So we'll forward these invites out to to everyone that's been participating for you to come in. I'll be in the session taking questions and whatever. So if you want to build those up and come along and ask me, then I'll be around for those two sessions. The deadline for submitting everything will be at the end of January, Friday the 27th of January at noon. And if when you have finished that, please submit them into our climate inbox. So yeah, once you've completed those, pop it into send us an email via that inbox. But if you do want to get in touch with me before those sessions or after those sessions, here's my email address anyway, and I'm happy to have any further conversations with anybody. And you guys know all the websites and everything and the e-bulletins. And what I'm going to do is just drop a general LGA feedback form in the chat as well, for you to just take a few moments to provide us feedback on what you found helpful and help us to help you in sort of shaping our offer going forward.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tom.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So the slides are coming out with all the links on. Just before I invite Charlie to launch, just to confirm that following Charlie is going to be Katie and Rachel from Hampshire, and then Rachel from Stroud will finish. So Charlie, I know you've got to go at 10:30, so be really grateful. Thank you very much indeed.
Yes, so apologies for having to be quite so quick and out the door. I'd like to have been at the Q&A session. I've said to Rosemary, if it's really urgent, text me and I'll see if I can nip out for a couple of minutes. But I've got a really important team building session with the whole of the Johan Better senior management crowd very shortly. So this is the work that informs that, which is a piece of work that, so I don't work for Greater Manchester Command Authority. I'm part of a tendered consortium providing this work for them, and Red Corp is the same organisation that did this work for West Yorkshire back in 2020. That's the basic premise of it. For that, we did a whole load of research about what the key components are, and I think those 5 components there then become the ones that come out of the wash as being the most critical parts of it. We then interviewed a whole lot of people. Richard on the call as well did quite a few of these about what the primary challenges were for this. And they're very similar to what Richard's highlighted in his bubble diagram, which I'd like to get hold of later, and because that looked like a very useful way of much fewer lists. I like something with fewer lists. And then it breaks down into this, which is a little bewildering at first look, but it takes those color-coded bits, those colors, and maps them over all of the different components that we identified that I've been working up ever since I started doing work for SHAP in 2009. And this is looking at the 10 critical components that we need to look at. Not all of those need to be delivered locally. Some of them are things that can be bought in. They're not geographically specific. So you'll see the first column is what you can do locally, what you can hope to piggyback on being done nationally, unless you want to take a lead. And then something in between, which is where you join up with other interested local authorities or organizations, and you make it happen by building things like consortiums. So that set of themes comes out into those 10 key components. And then we identified a bunch of those that were definitely local and looked at those first bits and pieces that you could bring together to make those work. It's in the report. I'll put the link up in a second. If you just go to the retrofit tab on SHAP's website, it's still up there, pride of place. And those are the key recommendations, nothing huge to get it started, but the things that take the longest time to build. So get some kind of coordinating body together. We called it a hub back then. The PV and battery installations is a means of generating an income stream. And if you're anything like GM, catching up with the 15 million tonnes over budget you already are, and you only started the budget in 2017. The finance vehicle is now, I've spent 9 months trying to create it, really quite a challenge. But then you also need to make sure that some retrofits are happening, that you can get some good comms on, get some good pictures on, not, as my photos turn out to be, just lots of people, lots of pictures of insulation. It turns out people like pictures of people. Who knew? So that we can make sure that people see it happening. And actually I did manage to manage a few pictures that looked all right. So they form the basis of Johan Better's intro. And so the recommendations coming out of that report were get some initial foundations created, get some building blocks coming out of them, lots of small projects that people can handle that aren't going to be mind melting and may already be ongoing, and then get them to the point where you've got scalable deployment of those key areas, getting the customers happy, making sure you know what data you've done. Manchester City Council 15 years ago started on this journey, but they couldn't get hold of any data about how they were doing, so they couldn't get anything to trumpet for years. The financial vehicle, the numbers are eye-watering. They are international phone numbers, but with a pound sign at the front of them. They are, but they are obviously have a whole load of effects about economic redevelopment. They are the way we're going to regenerate neighbourhoods, let's be honest. But scalability, as was highlighted earlier, we don't have the people. Where do we get them from? And how do we get this all to scale up? So that was all then transported into Johan Better. As you can see, the quality of the graphics radically improves, courtesy of the people in whose offices I'm currently sat. And that is a consortium of 10 different bodies altogether. looking at delivering on all of those key components, so the whole thing comes together as a result of a tender that the CA put out beginning of this year. That's then looking at those 10 components, but delivered by those key people. And there's the link to the originating report down in the bottom corner there. And so those components then play as I've mapped this over the customer journey. It's not the neatest map, but you've got your customer journey across the top there, and then you've got your delivery stages beneath that. And so the key components are additional revenues and that battery storage proposition. It's the only place we can now, if anyone goes back to the SHAP report from 2011 on the community green deal, the way that we were getting the retrofits to pay for themselves was using the feed-in tariff. This is the replacement for feed-in tariff. The financial vehicle, as I said, what we want to be able to do is create a progressive lending vehicle, something that can enable, you could even call it redistributive, although obviously you need to be careful about which political firmaments you mention that in, but those people that are able to pay, get them to buy some retrofit bonds, but certainly bring them inside your financial model so that you try and get lending at sub-high street levels, so that you build up, if your cost of finance is maybe 25 points below that, you can then cover the cost of finance of 3, 4, 5, and 6 until you dock onto the 100% funded regimes of LAD, GHG, etc. And so the idea is bring in large sources of funding. Lendology are our partners in that, so that we don't need to create the lender, we just need to create the lending, so that we're taking the willing to pay and making them into the able to pay. The scalability is critical, and it requires an awful lot of thinking across the silos. The really useful thing about being procured through the CA is I've now managed to get doors open I've not managed to get open before. It's been fantastically useful and a massive help. And it's meant that I have actually, whilst we are about 3 months behind on that schedule, largely because of supply chain, but I can see light at the end of the tunnel on it. There is the full roadmap. So there are those components that are identified right at the beginning of this piece. With our key milestones in that, we've missed the milestone to a bit in that we haven't managed to get on site. There are no contractors. I've spent 9 months trying to find them. They're all too busy. Apparently 20% of British contractors have gone bust in the last 2 years. So that's not going to help the supply chain either. I think I'm coming to the conclusion we may need a great deal more intervention to shut that gap, because that's now the biggest one. I can see light at the end of the tunnel on the finance. We've got some brilliant stuff coming through on the other components, but trying to make sure we've got capacity to scale this is easily the biggest obstacle. And the last of the 10 components is the workforce development. They've just won the Ashton Award, but B4Box are members of our consortium, and they're brilliant. Frankly, they started off taking ex-offenders, teaching them how to build. Aileen McDonald is an elemental force, and they've now got 72 people, cards in, living wage as their minimum pay, and all properly looked after. It's a lovely working environment. They've taken long-term unemployed, care leavers, and are building on that foundation of ex-offenders at the start. And then they basically take them through training, and then the ones that look like they're going to be able to be made into something, become useful members of the company, they then keep them. That sounds a bit opportunistic, but realistically, they're not social services. They have to stop somewhere. But as a result, they've got this brilliant crew of people. And I'm advising them directly so that we can see how they can grow. And the idea is that because they sit astride the idea of training and contracting, they understand the contracting world rather than just let's face it, there are some elements of just box ticking and MVQs. So what we're looking to do is get to a point where we can get the accreditation bodies for past 2030 to work with the certifying bodies for MVQ, so that we can get people onto site doing the work now, looking after them. So I've redesigned some retrofit measures to make it easier for them, so that we can then get people certified and get the companies certified and start to build capacity. And that's my last slide.
Wow, thanks, Charlie. I know there was a huge amount packed in there, and you've done a lovely segue into the next presentation. But I think for everybody on the call today, we would be very happy to run a separate session where we could go back and look at some of the policy development and how that's actually starting to feed through. And I think if you wanted to invite any of your elected members or other colleagues to look at, Richard talked about the complexity of all of those issues in scaling up retrofit. Charlie's revisited it in a very ordered way, but nothing can happen without something happening in quite a lot of places. So I think if you want a bit more time looking over all of that, we could set up a separate session for that. But Charlie won't be here for the Q&A, but we can try and field any questions. And as we said, Charlie will be at the end of a text, so we can send him anything very specific. But we can pick up on
the first one. The retrofit bonds, we're looking at it with abundance, but it's currently, we've got the GFI in Manchester trying to see if they can make that happen. There's nothing, basically abundance of the people to talk to if you want to do something directly. But I think to coordinate it, we should have another session on that. I think a finance session would be quite handy at some point, but I really do need to go. So nice to meet you.
No, that's marvellous. Thank you. Very much appreciated, Charlie. Thank you very much.
Yes. Bye.
Okay, cheers. See you later. So we can unpack some of that at a future session. We are looking at in much more detail about the green finance. I know everybody is. So if you're interested in joining in that discussion, let us know as well. Sorry. So could I hand over to Katie and Rachel from Hampshire, because I think that sets up your presentation really nicely. Thanks very much.
Can you see the presentation?
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. Okay.
I can, Rachel, thank you. So hi everybody, hopefully you can hear me all okay. I'm Katie Matthews, I'm Development Manager at Hampshire County Council, and I'm joined today by Rachel Sale, my colleague, who is also a Development Manager. She's going to be flicking across the slides for me as we go, and may have some input into the presentation as well. But essentially what we wanted to do today was talk to you about how we're moving forward with retrofit in terms of the skills side of things for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. But you know, we're very much at the beginning of this journey, as many people are. So we're learning along the way as we go. But please feel free to ask any questions as we go through today. So before I get started on the slides, just give you a bit of a background as to the sort of type of role that Rachel and I do within the council. So we work within what's known as the Skills and Participation Service. So that sits within children's services within Hampshire County Council at the moment. And the service essentially exists to ensure that all young people in Hampshire make a successful transition into adult life. We help them to participate, succeed and progress into education and employment. But we also work, and ever increasingly more, with businesses to help them meet their current and future skills needs and tap into a lot of our study programmes that we offer for young people for work placement. But really we're ensuring that Hampshire has that high skilled workforce to deliver growth. But we also increasingly as well are supporting adults in the community to improve their skills and quality of life. And from that kind of area of work, we bid and deliver projects. So two of the projects that we previously delivered, one of them was the Construction Skills Fund, which was back in 2018 to 2021. And that was about getting people to skilled in construction to meet that shortfall in skills that was coming through. That project has now ended. We're now running one called the Technical Construction Skills Fund, which covers the north of Hampshire and Surrey. Rachel is the project manager on that programme, and that is to support unemployed people into construction. So from both of those projects, that's really enabled us to build really strong stakeholder partnerships with FE, training providers and employers in the construction industry. Over the last few years, we've been doing that. And with the Construction Skills Fund, we essentially lifted our stakeholder group and moved it into the Technical Construction Skills Fund, but we were moving into a different area. We were moving into Surrey. So we were looking at bringing in new partners as well. Another piece of work that we do day to day as part of what we do is employment skills plans. So we support and offer advice to district and borough councils around developing their own employment skills plans with contractors, and we also have our own framework of contractors that build schools, residential homes, country parks, etc., that come through our frameworks within the council. We know increasingly employers are keen to talk about the social value aspect of what they do, how they're putting back into the community. So we work with them to develop an employment skills plan, to look at what opportunities they can offer to young people and adults in terms of jobs, careers advice, work placements, whatever that might be, and anything they can do to kind of engage with their local community. So from that piece of work, we've built over time, we've built relationships with employers, and we talk to them about their skills pipeline coming through and what they're looking, areas they're looking to develop in the future. So when the whole retrofit agenda came along, it felt right that it kind of came and sat with us, but it didn't initially sit with us. It first came through our climate change team, our climate change strategy, and our climate change team were working with Parity Projects, who were initially funded through some community renewal funding to work with them around doing some stakeholder mapping in the area around retrofit. And they started to hold events, bring stakeholders together, and that's where we became involved through our sort of collaborative working across the council with them. They asked us to come along because we were identified as being the team that talked to employers and worked with skills, and particularly around our construction projects that we've been working on. So we got involved through that way with Parity, and I think at the start they were going to do that kind of employer FE training provider mapping exercise, but we're kind of coming in to kind of fill that gap because we have links already in those areas, so that made absolute sense. So Rachel, can I ask you just to move across to the next slide? Thank you. Okay, so this first one, I think we all know why we need to support the retrofit skills agenda. As a local authority, we are absolutely aligning this with our climate change strategy there, but also with supporting our district and borough councils within Hampshire and on the Isle of Wight as well. We know that the reasons why we need to do it. We know how many, the figures are out there, how many new entrants we're going to need to bring in to join the sector. But with our climate change team, they're also working on a separate project, but very closely aligned with the able to pay market. So we know that that's great. They're going to start that piece of work, and they're going to be going out and talking to residents about how they can retrofit their homes. But we need the skills people there to be able to deliver this work. And then that also brings in the whole social housing sector as well, and what we need to do to respond to that with the shorter deadline. So we need to ensure, the aim of what we're trying to do is to ensure that we're providing the retrofit skills needed to address, our able to pay market and the social housing sector in our region. Could you move into the next slide, please? Thank you. So what we collaboratively came together to do as a council, through our work with Parity Projects and the climate change team, we identified that we needed to really kickstart this skills. The skills agenda with our FE and our training providers. There wasn't a lot happening out there in terms of courses that were on offer. We entered into a partnership back in the summer with the Retrofit Academy. They were actually a speaker on one of these technical briefings a few weeks ago. So they are enabling us to introduce a new retrofit programme into our area. They do work with other local authorities as well. I believe they work with Devon and Essex. So they have a background of working with local authorities and know how they operate and what we need to do. But the key purpose is to provide a collaborative approach to the supply of skills and training in the area. So we're going to be working in partnership with them initially for 1 to 3 years to start to build that training capacity across our FE and training providers in Hampshire, offering their retrofit qualifications that they have developed. Could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so to do this, we had to purchase what they call an area infrastructure license A with them, and that is having someone like me identified to work with their partnership colleague in their team to talk about how we're going to address this, how we're going to talk to colleges, talk to training providers to get them interested to build the capacity, and to talk to them about their new qualifications that they have on offer, which are the advisor, the assessor, the coordinator qualifications that are all aligned to PLAS 2035, and also to enable colleges and FE to scale up their trade courses as well to meet the needs of retrofit demand. Could you move forward, please? Thank you. Okay, what does the Partnership A licence include? So it's a partnership agreement with us. They will support us to establish a group to drive forward retrofit in the region. They also undertake lots of national and local research. They are doing at the moment a supply chain report on Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. They're going out talking to employers, looking at where the gaps are, what the skills needs are, helping us to identify some local training providers as well to deliver our retrofit training. Through this exercise, we've had some training providers contact us who we haven't had any contact with before, but want to be involved in this piece of work. So that's exciting as well. And also they look at funding for retrofit. So they'll apply for pots of funding that might be available that might not be appropriate for us to apply for, but that will support that whole the agenda for the people that are in partnerships with them. They also help us to look at our funding landscapes and where we could draw down funding from particular projects or areas within the council. Next slide, please. Okay, once we have identified the training providers or colleges that we want to work with, we then talk to them about a licence B and then being part of our official training consortium. So that will give them exclusivity to deliver the retrofit qualifications across the area. And there are links on there where you can go and have a look at the types of qualifications we're talking about. What they do is they essentially go into colleges and work with the tutors to train them up to deliver their courses. So they'll put them on what they call a trainer course, and to enable them to be able to then cost out those courses further as they go through. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is just to give you a flavour of what we've done so far and what we're planning to do next. So on the 2nd of November, we did a soft launch. We did a webinar. Oh, go back. Thank you. We did a soft launch. We did a webinar, and we had a great attendance. We had over 100 people sign up to that, and it was a real mixture of people that came along, including local authorities, housing associations, employers, FE providers, training providers. Our local net zero hubs came along. I have put the link on there for the webinar. You are more than welcome to view it. It has talks on there, again, from the Retrofit Academy, what they do. It has talks on there from our climate change team. So it just gives you a flavour, I think, of how we're trying to join everything together so that we're not duplicating our efforts, working in silos, not just across us as an upper tier authority, but across our district and boroughs as well, to make sure that we have a good vision and a view on what they're doing and how we can support that. So we had a great attendance from that webinar. From that webinar, it was a bit of a call to action as well. So it was asking the audience that attended, would you like to be part of our steering group? We're going to be setting up a steering group from January to improve that collaboration and again to ensure that we're not duplicating what we're doing. There's lots of pots of funding, money flying around. I've put on the slide there, you know, there's the Strategic Development Fund that a lot of our colleges applied for back in the summer. Some of them have been successful, and for an example, one of our colleges has got capital funding to build a retrofit hub, but they didn't have any idea what kind of training they were going to put into that hub. They just got the funding for the hub, and then they were going to sort of think about that later. Well, now we're working with them to say, actually, we've got these qualifications, as well as all the kind of trade courses you're going to put in there, which are your bread and butter. There's actually these assessor qualifications, coordinator qualifications that's going to draw in perhaps a different, it's going to draw in businesses who want to upskill their workforce. So those are the kind of conversations we want to be having at the steering groups. We're also setting up, separate to that, the training consortium. So that's going to be the people that are delivering the qualifications, the FE and the training providers. And we put out an expression of interest form for that in partnership with the Retrofit Academy. And we do then a bit of due diligence around the people that have applied, look at Ofsted ratings, etc., things like that, if they have them, their readiness, how ready they are to deliver these qualifications, because the aim is that they will be delivering these qualifications by April next year, once all their staff have gone through the appropriate training. And then it's really as well just accessing any skills funding that might be out there and ensuring that those kind of messages are coming through on these groups to giving these stakeholders the opportunity to apply and be supported with that. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so this is the final slide, but I think, you know, what I've kind of learned from going through this journey is, you know, where, especially with where we sat within the council, we didn't, that I'm talking to people now that without working collaboratively, I suppose, with the climate change team, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do that before. So I'm talking to like local community energy hubs who are saying this is great, we can get your message out there about this training to all the employers that we work with who want to improve their energy efficiency ratings. We want to work and support young people to be interested in these types of careers in the future. So I'm finding lots of paths through this type of work, working with other teams. We've talked to our property services teams quite a lot recently about all the retrofit work that's been happening with our schools, and the work they've been doing with that. So we're now really starting to join the dots, because they have lots of links to construction employers as well that will be interested, I'm sure, in this retrofit training. And then there's also, you know, it's great, we'll hopefully build up the training demand, but we also need to have, you know, the demand on the other side as well. All the work that the climate change team are doing with the able to pay market and parity projects, as that develops and takes off next year, we're hoping that we're going to be able to meet that with the demand, and then we'll have the supply. And I think, you know, what we've learned from our previous projects has been a huge help to us in, or will be a huge help to us in developing these steering groups and stakeholder partnerships. And just continuing to build on our existing relationships that we have. But I think that was it from me, unless Rachel, you had anything you wanted to add.
No, I think you've included everything there, Katie. Thank you.
That was absolutely brilliant, and I think it's brought together so many of the themes that we've been talking about. So you finished on the collaboration and building of partnerships. I would suggest almost an oven-ready template of how anybody looking for an action plan submission as part of this programme could look at, if action hasn't already started on the skills in the supply chain. And we've talked a lot about supply chain issues. You know, there's a lot of hints and tips there, which is really useful. And I think also the reflection that the supply chain isn't just the contractors. There's an awful lot of other people who need to be upskilled in this agenda for us to be able to build that comprehensive approach. So I was going to invite Rachel from Stroud to talk, and then I think we'll have about a minute at the end, Tom, if you could hang on to just see if there's one or two questions for you before you go, if that's all right. And then we'll open out into a few minutes of wider Q&A in case there's any more detail that anybody wants to get hold of at this time. So Rachel, could I invite you to share your screen?
Sure. Let me just set that up and ready to go. There you go. Hi everyone. I work at a rural district council in Gloucestershire as their lead on sustainable strategy. And so we're in a two-tier system with a wider public sector collaboration at leadership level on climate change. And as a result of that, I also take the role of county-wide coordinator on retrofits. And I love the complex challenges that you've been hearing so much about. And that's just as well, because retrofit certainly delivers. And I have not long to use our Gloucestershire experience now to try and explain how we have sorted the threads into colours and started to evolve simple machinery to get it all working together, moving towards large-scale delivery. So I'm going to whiz a bit, but I've got my email up there and I'm always happy to be contacted. And I'm going to talk to you about our understanding of the challenge, our story so far, and then our first next steps. And we've covered quite a lot in all these sessions about the retrofit challenges. So I'll just do a quick overview on my next slide of how we see it in Gloucestershire to sort of encapsulate all of that. So this is our understanding. So first of all, there is the carbon challenge that lies in our built environment, so much of which is beyond public sector control. And then there is the financing challenge, referring to that upfront cost barrier to retrofit. But there is also a fragmented approach. So we've got public estates work, social housing, private investment, all happening in silos and heavily led by grants and incentives, and that's that boom bust economy ecosystem for the delivery sector. And so it's hard for them to plan. And as a result, there is, sorry, I've wiggled on too far, but as a result, there is skills and supply chain struggle because businesses are not investing in themselves. And FE colleges are afraid also to take the risk to do those new courses with expensive sites and everything else. And due to this uncertainty, skills provision doesn't grow either. And to add to this, we've got those new quality standards past 2035 on the horizon, and there's a lot more uncertainty as a result of that. And finally, we are often in the public sector in the role as community leaders, but we're poorly equipped because it's a non-statutory agenda. And so leadership resources to help overcome these challenges is very sort of compromised. And there are some statutory conflicts as well, like, for example, planning systems. And then finally, there's the grid, energy infrastructure that is certainly not fit for the future. And so that's kind of what we're working against. But I like to simplify this a bit further into what I call the 4 strategic dependencies of retrofit. And there they are up on the screen. And I refer to them as dependencies because any success in retrofit depends upon them all being accessed and actively progressed. And on the next slide, there's a diagram, and that adds in our 3 main areas of action we're delivering on in Gloucestershire to illustrate the dependent nature of retrofit action. So there are the 4 strategic dependencies there along the bottom. And above this, we've got our 3 key action areas in play at the moment. And they are labelled as drivers because the more we deliver, the stronger each of the strategic dependencies become. And that is why this presentation, I've given a more fun title of Pulling the Strings, because if you don't work them all together, things go wrong. So, for example, spiking demand without paying attention to the need for growth in the sector through incentive schemes, so demand outstrips supply. We've all seen that happen. So in Gloucestershire, we are working all the action drivers together and through the county-wide collaboration, trying to break the silo approach so we can reap maximum benefits into those strategic dependencies. So our story so far looks a bit like this, and there are lots of synergies to all the things we've heard in terms of the great work other areas are doing so far. So just one slide to try and cover it all. So far our story is that through competitive funding, blended with local public sector buy-in and schemes like ECO, we have a more than 20-year track record of award-winning partnership working with the NHS and the third sector, accessing all the affordable warmth grants and pots. And currently, I think we've got about 8 million in play of funding in that. But we're also, Stroud District Council has also led, we're the only council with their own housing stock. So we've led the housing associations working in collaboration with our other local authorities on the social housing decarbonisation funds, wave 1, preparing for wave 2. And we also got some of those pilots for innovation in social housing. And we additionally got some of the capacity funding that BEIS did about 2 years ago to sort of upscale the MEES minimum energy efficiency standards work we were doing. So that's sort of that area. Then we look at our own estates. So a lot of public sector decarbonisation funds in the county. I think NHS got something like 30 million alone in the first round. So there's loads of that going on. And we've also got a long track record of accessing these schemes. So Stroud District Council is notorious for its declaration of being carbon neutral on its own direct operations since 2015, and that's because we did a lot of feed-in tariff work, and more recently we did RHI, and we've got our water source heat pump technology in here. So we're working quite well with expertise on our own estates. And then we've got the skills bit. So we have, for example, a couple of years ago, growth funding went into building a specialist construction training centre, which is sort of the construction industry taking a lead on skills and development in the Forest of Dean. More recently, I've worked very hard with our local UTC at Berkeley Green, which is focused on sustainable energy really as its main area of development, to source fundings from our pooled business rates, the Social Economic Development Fund, to set up a retrofit training centre there. And we're also doing a lot of sector skills work. So for example, next week I'll be hosting a roundtable here of all those players, plus people who are doing the research at the moment, like Business West for the local skills improvement plans, and the Southwest Net Zero Energy Hub, who've been doing a lot of green skills work. We're sort of bringing them around the table to bring that bigger green skills picture really into focus onto retrofit, and to work out how we can join that up a bit better too, actually, and get it working a bit better. And then there's that kind of last area, which is the kind of the focus really of our next steps, which is that kind of leveraging private investment in through that bit of the built environment that's almost untouchable because we have no control over it, private homes and businesses. So at the moment, right now, we're facing kind of interesting times, as they call it. We know that we need to bolster ourselves for unprecedented and rapid growth in affordable warmth needs. But in Gloucestershire, as well as that, we're also very focused on generating more interest from what some people call able to pay, and which I don't like because there's a huge gap between able and willing, as other presenters have talked about. And actually they might not be able to pay, but they might be kind of more savvy in using things like green mortgages and lendology and other things. So I call it the self-financing bit, the private investment market. And we see this as important because there's a need to normalise the economic growth pattern of the sector. So I think that what's sometimes missing is asking that question, why is it that a sector founded on what is our country's usual economic bread and butter, you know, if in your recession you build your way out of it, does not grow to meet, in an unaided way, to meet the demand there? So I'm going to do kind of economics 101 now. So this diagram and sort of matrix is used widely. It's not my invention at all. In fact, but it sums up a way any sector would normally grow. And you can see you've got 4 segments there. You've got market penetration, which is when you get a growth in the market share in terms of your existing products and delivery. Market development, where you sort of have current products, you take them to new markets and you get growth that way. Then you've got product development, where new products are taken into existing markets. So that's more about innovation, I suppose. And then you've got diversification strategy, which is the riskiest bit of it all, where you take new products to new markets. And that's kind of a very simplified look at the kind of decisions that commercial businesses make in order to think about what they're going to do next for success. So why is it so hard to scale up retrofit? Because there's a variety of products, there's lots of innovation in this kind of sphere, and it's not the only sector that relies on skill development, supply chains and financing mechanisms. So I've come to the conclusion that it is that this market was not born in the usual way, not born in that usual way where something aspirational happens and you make everybody else want it through your marketing. So retrofit has been born through affordable warmth work. And at this point, I need to stress that I am an absolute champion of affordable warmth work, spent nearly 18 years in the third sector working on increasing access to retrofit for those very reasons. It's very precious. So we need to protect it. So we need to understand this. So, I don't want to come across, there's a fear at this point that I come across of going affordable warmth is bad because it's the cause of all our problems, but we need to understand why this, and it's about a singular focus on affordable warmth. So in affordable warmth, the demand is created through social prescribing referrals, and we talk about boom and bust and the unpredictability of all of that, but actually one of the things is there's a predictable demand there that installers are very happy to work with. They understand that grant system. There's loads of work. I mean, we've got an award-winning affordable warmth programme in Gloucestershire, but we've never made a dent in that percentage of fuel poverty. It's very dependable, but it retains at its core the principles of benefits testing and health referrals and an emphasis on energy efficiency to avoid fuel cost. Incentives come along, like the Green Homes Grant, they peak demand, and installers are then able to kind of cherry pick that opportunity, and it's a top up to them but not an incentive to grow. There's not a, so that overall you see things sort of ticking along. The revenue goes into capital. There's no commercialization, there's no marketing, there's no messaging. There's not a great deal of scope for growth. Horizon scanning sees business as usual. Riskier growth investments can be avoided. And I know that's a bit of a generalization, but we've seen it to some extent where Green Homes Grant, for example, one of the big problems was installers didn't want to go through all of that to become Trustmark accredited to access that grant. And so if we don't fix this, then no schemes, incentives or tricks will help us, as the 4 strategic dependencies will not ever come into balance and alignment. So we'll not build the capacity or generate the demand that we need to meet our carbon challenges. And that is why we in Gloucestershire are working in partnership now and using competitive funding streams at the moment to help us develop services for the self-financing sector. So we're really going for a very thin sliver of the market at the moment, the high-end aspirational lifestyle people. We are working on capacity building, which we got some money from the LAD capacity building funds a couple of years ago, and we've put in some basics. We're trying to create the kind of aspirational lifestyle element that kind of leads to that social buzz we need around retrofit to create the demand. So far we've kind of got some county-wide staffing in that I manage from Stroud District Council. We've bought tools like parity data sets. We've got some basic online services, but we're not pushing it as a public service yet because we need to complete our work on understanding this new market, and we need to bring our delivery partners with us, the third sector. You know, a self-financing market is a completely different beast to an affordable warmth market, and we need to know how to trigger that. So at the moment we're completing some work with which we commissioned and went to London South Bank University, as they're part of the Building Services Research Institute Association, and they're in partnership with Ashton, and they're working with us on the market knowledge bit. So they're kind of completing some work about understanding research, talking to stakeholders, looking at that market segmentation, their trigger points, who are their change agents, what tools do their change agents, do we make this attractive? And then the second part there is a bit that we will be embarking in the new year, where we've earmarked UK Shared Prosperity funding in some of our investment plans, but also have accessed other funds as well to top that up, to do action research. So actual practical work with a few groups of this target market to really get to grips with working with them. It's quite resource intensive. It's not a pilot of services. What it is, it's informing us about the sorts of things that our kind of knowledge hub online customer journey directing signposting services need in order to really work for that market. And then at the same time as that, I'm really working hard at national level to build those strategic partnerships. So we are talking to Lendology. We have got Retrofit Academy coming to our roundtable next week. We are looking at the same thing that we just heard about with them. I'm also working with community energy, because that has a role to play in the private sector as well. Talking to places like Nationwide who are doing the green mortgages. And looking at transfer innovations as well. So we've got those landmark projects, Retrofit Works, Carbon Co-op, all of those sorts of things. And that's why we are really focused on a national collaboration, because the kind of dichotomy in retrofit, if you like, is that you need a very localized approach, because the customer journey is complex and they want that peer-to-peer support, that kind of trust, safe environment where everyone else is doing it. But in order to get self-financing, scalable stuff, you need to have a bigger way of making the business case. So you need to deliver in both ways. So that's kind of where we're at.
That's brilliant, yeah. Rachel, thank you. And you've taken us to what is my key kind of thing at the moment about the business case, and how we get the business case listened to by people where we think we've already made a really strong evidence-based proposition about why do this and what would happen if we don't do it. So That was phenomenal. Thank you very much, Rachel. So if you could send the slides, and we'll send them out to everybody, and obviously the recording. We have gone through the Q&A session, but just before Tom leaves, does anybody have a specific question about action planning for Tom? And then Rachel, thank you. We'll come back to you in a second. I think just shout out. I can't see anything in the chat.
Can I ask a question? Marianne Overton, hi. On the action planning, and I'm sorry if I missed a bit, but can you get a clear idea about exactly how much carbon is going to be saved by each action? So and the costs, so we can really see what is the most cost-effective solutions?
I think that's quite a big question, Marianne, and maybe we have a chat offline about it, because I think what we're talking about with the action planning is what is the thing that anybody can do next within their council to move this agenda forward. What you're talking about is the really, really big strategic, I think, low carbon agenda, climate change agenda. So maybe we'll have a different chat.
Okay, it's just choosing what to do next is really the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Seconded. Oh, sorry. I'll say hi. I'd like to join in that conversation, because yes, what to do next would be maybe for us to put a A4 piece of paper together, and then to put costs next to it for tenants to sort of see how much they would save.
So Beck and Tom, we'll take that away, and maybe suggest we put in an earlier session than the January ones to just talk that through, if that would be all right. Great. Cara's got her hand up.
Thanks. And to add to that also, I think about the health and wellbeing benefits is another caveat in which to kind of capture action to happen, particularly from this week's very sad news about that young person who suffered and sadly died from, inhaling mold. So I think that's another really great, signposting and action area to be looking at. I'm a huge advocate of climate change action,
and that's what I mean, Cara, about the business case. We feel we've proved this business case, but we still can't get that traction that we're talking about. So I think from the chat and from those questions, we've got a number of additional technical webinars almost that people want to talk about. So what is the carbon impact of some of this action planning? What about this real focus on health and well-being coming out of retrofit, and about the finance session, and picking up on a lot of the stuff Charlie and others, Rachel, have been talking about. So we're running a little bit behind, and I know people are starting to leave. We're moving towards 11:30. So if there are any really technical questions about those presentations, do you want to put them into the chat so everybody can see them and see the answers? And then we'll try and pick them up in any follow-up to this session. But I think thank you all very much indeed for those presentations this morning. I mean, just phenomenal, the activity that's going on. And I think the objective of this programme was to try and let people see what other people are doing, start those conversations. And for me, some of the action plans might be actually a way of formalising those conversations with your neighbours, so that you can do that knowledge transfer as effectively as possible and start building the evidence base and the capacity. So can I ask John then to kind of start on bringing all of that amazing amount of information together? And it seems like we're just at the beginning of this conversation, nowhere near the end of a programme. So we'll take that away and see what we can do going forward. But thank you very much indeed, everybody.
Okay, fine. You can see my screen? Okay. Well, thanks. And wow, I'll just go back to the one I actually want to be on. Wow, what a morning, and stuff has been flying in there that has been fantastic. Just great to listen to. And as it was happening, I was just thinking, gosh, so some of the themes that we've talked about in coaching here in the sessions, here they are very visible for us. I wanted this to be partly reflective and part of an aid memoir as well. And what the emerging themes through our conversations, and ones that we carry forward, and I was really pleased to see them echoed in Tom's slide. There's a whole idea about trust, clarity, and decision making. And it feels to me that what we've seen this morning, what we've heard this morning, is each of those areas being played out in quite specific fields. And it's been powerful when we start to sort of peel away and say, at what point then did we agree on the clarity that was needed? How did we build the trust, and who made the decisions? Where were those decisions made, and what were they responding to? What we were doing was jumping in and out of hard and soft systems. And at this point, I want to return to Richard's slides and to thank him for borrowed. Theft is such a pejorative word, isn't it? But I did nick them, and here we go again. And we looked at this, didn't we? And when you take a look at what's going on there, not only are there some common threads, but there was that whole idea of where we have influence and where we don't, backed up with where we have power and where we don't. And what I felt is happening is that there's a need to extend the reach of collaboration and power. And that power, I don't mean that in the in again a pejorative sense. I mean it in our capacity to influence and to get things done. And through our coaching sessions, I've tried to keep it pretty simple and to take a look at some tools that enable us to get things done. So let's take a further look at what we saw, and what Richard saw as being within the immediate grasp of where we have power to influence. And there's an awful lot outside of there, isn't there? When we take that away, my challenge is, when we look at those areas, what's the relationship between those areas and the hard and soft actions that we've spoken about in that sideways figure 8? And you can see that those areas where we have perhaps less influence, they've almost been the subject matter of what we've been speaking about this morning. And if I wanted to rebrand this morning, just right now, it would look a lot like, how do we do this stuff then? And the presentations that we've heard would take us in that direction. Here's what you need to do. What I hope is that through the coaching sessions, we've given you some chance, some opportunity to consider approaches that might make that journey a little easier. And you can see, revising the approach, that on the hard system side, we need to be innovative. We need to find different ways of doing things. And perhaps your action plans might be about exploring a different way of doing something, the methodology used, the approaches used. And given the opportunity to be quite creative with the way you assemble that action plan, the use of video, podcast, blogs, I feel there's a really powerful space created for us to carry out meaningful actions that lead us in the very positive directions that we've heard spoken about, that have been spoken about this morning. But as a reminder, on the soft side, there's that whole idea of being explicit. Not only explicit about our role, but explicit about what we want people to do. And that can sometimes lead to some quite challenging conversations. And think again, colleagues, about that energy, that quadrant that we talked about, power, influence. Who should we be talking to, and how do we want to move them? How do we want to excite interest so that people actually not only have high levels of interest, but they also develop high levels of power, of influence to get things changed, so that they turn their interest into energies. I wanted to just reflect a little on my take from our work. Each session I've left with an affirmation of how important it is for us as a species, as humans, to connect with each other. And that necessity has been accelerated by our coming to terms with the post-COVID world. That the manner in which we interact with each other has changed. That when we're doing maybe a Zoom or Teams meeting, it can sometimes be highly transactional. Do we have opportunities to pick up on those softer areas? Whatever the outcome of our different ways of working, it seems to me that connectivity is a major benefit of the approach of working with others. It's that hidden benefit, that collateral positive spin-off that we've set out to do one thing, but look at what we've built because we started. And when I reflect on the on Tom's 6-point action plan, you'd be clear about what was started. And when we start, other stuff will happen. We, through the coaching sessions, have discovered and spoken about other perspectives. Equally, we've been, I think, aware as we've listened to each other, the work we've done, the ideas we've explored, and it's been repeated again today, the power of inquiry, the power of reaching out. And if our action plans incorporate how we reach out, how we inquire, and the results of inquiry, and haven't we heard it from the results of our inquiries, we can then filter that down to what we can do, what we'd like to do, what we can't do, whether there's a budget, whether there's not a budget, whether there might need to be a budget. Also, as I've worked with you all, what has screamed out from every event has been the expressed desire from everyone involved to do the right thing. Now, you might be doing those right things in different places, but that doesn't detract from the enormous commitment to delivering the right work for the right reasons. And there are blockers and stoppers, and of course there are. And what have we heard today in the presentations, and what have we heard throughout the coaching sessions, and what might feature in your action plan? The challenge of making sense out of complexity. And that alone, an action plan of its own, really. But as we've spoken openly, honestly, and in some cases revealed that vulnerability, we said, look, I'm not sure about this. We've been able to maybe strip away some of the complexities so that we've got a clearer idea of what it is we actually need to do, that important next step. And as we're looking at moving to action planning and picking on one area, those 4 questions in the right column, they're a good test to ask yourself, what will happen if I do this? What will happen if I don't do it? And then we get to the 2 challenging ones. What won't happen if I do it? And then the crunch question, what won't happen if I don't do this? And when we're taking a look at quite complex change, we are presented with an opportunity to ask ourselves, if we don't, what won't happen. And the crunch change, the crunch answer to that question is we won't achieve the progress we want to achieve in order to secure the benefits to ourselves and to the future of retrofitting, of decarbonisation, of redressing some of the challenges our environment faces, the health and well-being of our population. And I wanted you to know there is a personal reflection that italicized part at the top of the right column. That's who I've worked with. That's you, hardworking people. You have passion, belief, and energy to this challenging and important agenda. And what we're asking you to do now is, as you're considering your action plan, it's not to produce volumes, and I think, again, Tom has been, absolutely clear about this. It's about producing that which can be done. Think outside the box, be innovative in the way you do it, but something that adds meaning and value to your work. And as we're moving into the last round of the coaching sessions, I think you probably gather, I approach them with humility and a great deal of energy that's fueled by your participation through this enormously challenging but inevitably hugely rewarding agenda. So thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, John. I just want to carry on the discussion for the next few weeks. It's really inspiring and really important. So we're just going to close now with just a wrap up about what the next steps are, a reminder about what Tom said. If you've got any residual questions or thoughts about what you would like to see happen next, please just drop them into the chat and we'll capture all of that. You will get the presentations, you will get the recording, and clearly there's amazing things going on, but a lot of work to do. And if we can collaborate in the way that we have done so far through this programme, I think it'll take us a long way forward, much more effectively than some people's experiences so far. I know there's been a lot of importance for people about finding that they're not alone in these challenges and their sort of massive efforts to do things. So thank you all very much again, the speakers, my colleagues, and everybody who's been joining on the webinars, and look forward to seeing you in the coaching sessions. And Beck will just spend a couple of minutes just reminding you of the next steps. Thank you.
Cool, thank you everybody. Yes, so after the session, I will also be sending everybody a one-page document just outlining in more detail what actions we might like to see from you as your outputs from this programme. And that goes into quite a bit of detail, and I think will help you to sort of understand that it's actions that we want to see, not necessarily action plans, which might end up being static documents that never become acted upon. That's not what we want. We do want to see some strong, solid actions that actually take retrofit forwards. But we do need those outputs emailed to that climate inbox at the LGA by the deadline of the 27th of January at noon, which gives you that's 2 months basically from today to sort of think through what it is you're going to do and to put that together and to produce it. We note all of the comments that you've had about further information and further technical briefings that you might like to have to sort of help hone your thinking about what some of those actions might be. We will take that away and we will talk through those as a project team, and we'll come back to you if we can on what more could be offered. Myself and Tom will be hosting 2 more drop-in sessions on Friday the 13th of January and Tuesday the 17th of January, where you can come and talk to us about how your outputs, your actions are progressing, so you can kind of get some further feedback, some further support, and yeah, share your ideas with each other, which is a big part of what this whole programme has been about. I will be sending you out invitations to those 2 sessions, again with sort of some further information about that by the end of the week. So you will have all of that in your diaries and you haven't got to remember it. Okay. So thank you so much to all of you for participating so much in this programme and for the fantastic conversations that we've had, and for your commitment to this agenda. And that's all I have to say. Thank you. Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you very much. So if you want to just put anything else you would like to say into the chat, we'll collect that. We'll have a chat between ourselves and the LGA about any next steps. If there's anything you're doing that you think you would like to invite anybody in this programme or the wider councils to take part in, or to at least get the benefit of the materials from, please also share that. Feel very welcome. But thank you again to our speakers today. I just completely need to go and listen to all of that again. It was phenomenal. So thank you very much, and see you on the coaching sessions. Okay, bye then.